Please welcome our panel moderator, Ms. Megan Murphy of Bloomberg News. And our panel members, Mr. Carlos Jimenez, Mayor of Miami, Florida. Mr. Dennis Coderre, Mayor of Montreal, Ontario, Canada. And Mr. Spend Ahmeti, Mayor of Pristina, Kosovo.
Hi there. Such a delight to be here today on an issue that's so very important, both in my job as a journalist and also to the world at large. And I wanted to start by just saying I've got three mayors here from three very different cities and with three very different challenges. From Mayor Ahmeti, who is in a country that has the second largest level of coal deposits in the world still, to Montreal, which as a northern city faces very different challenges in adapting to climate change.
It's Quebec, Montreal, Quebec. Super.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Want to make that clear. And to Miami-Dade, which has been an incubator and at the forefront of this battle for a long time and faces challenges with rising sea levels to a variety of different things. So what I wanted to start out with, and I think I'll start with you, Mayor Coderre, I wanted to give you each a chance to highlight some of the initiatives you've taken as mayors and in your career in general to make concrete steps. For example, for you, you've been instrumental not only on sort of think locally, act globally, but in really leveraging networks, both in your country and globally, to advance the change you want to see. So what are some of the projects you'd highlight that you're taking there and have taken?
Well, let's put it this way. First of all, the think global, act local means is the agenda of the living together. So we're facing all the same challenges in a way. We need to share our best practices, so it's important to participate. Like for Compact for Mayor, this is really important. I'm also president of Metropolis, which is a main organization for one of the main cities. We are participating in C40, of course, but at the same time, it's important to show the example on the field. So we can share what we're doing here is important, but we need to walk the talk. And what we've been planning, especially in Quebec, at Montreal, we have hydroelectricity, so we focus a lot on electromobility because we know that most of the green gas emission are from transport. So it's important to focus on that. Same thing as the urban planning. We spoke a lot about having more bicycle, pedestrian, and all that. So we are focusing on that. But it's also those little gestures can make a difference. Like we want to ban plastic bag. We focus on the atmospheric pollution with the fireplace and the wood stove. So if you put all that together, you connect the dots and make sure, and we'll talk later on with other level of governments. Well, if you want to make things done, like the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, ask a mayor.
Exactly. Mayor Ahmeti, you have done some steps such as you've focused on LED lighting, you've focused on planting more trees. We spoke briefly in the back before about the challenges of being a smaller city, about how you can take incremental changes and make them to actually lead as an example in a region that has very different challenges. What do you think are the most important hurdles you face to actually making meaningful change?
To continue where Mayor of Montreal finished, Lyndon Johnson said, when the burdens of the presidency seem too heavy, I think it could be worse. I could be a mayor. We like that quote because obviously we know what it takes to deal with those kinds of problems. Now, if you're wondering where Pristina is and where Kosovo is, Pristina is the capital of the Republic of Kosovo. It's a very small new country that was just off a major conflict in 1999. It declared independence, and Pristina is the capital of it with almost 500,000 people. So we have, as you said, the second largest reserve of lignite in Europe. So we are under heavy pressure to develop new power plants because our old power plants are just getting older every day. We call them dinosaurs. So when I signed the Compact of Mayors and went back to my city and said, we're committing to climate change, people told me, are you crazy? We cannot afford it. we're too poor to talk about it. This is a topic that we should be talking about in about 10 to 15 years, because we're small, so we cannot influence major climate change. We're too poor, so we cannot afford it. And it's a small country anyway, so let's leave this to the big countries. And these are three problems that I want to highlight today, because I think a lot of small cities and small countries and poor countries are dealing with these issues and are left behind in this agenda. So what we've done in the city of Pristina is that we've invested heavily in a new bus fleet that we want to do. We've changed the public lighting. Paris planted 20,000 trees. We've planted 2,000 trees this year. So we're trying to have an impact on what is going on and be part of the climate change. But I think there are still big challenges ahead as a small city in a small country, in a place where I think most of the people have heard about Pristina for the first time today. And I think in Eastern Europe, this is the challenge now, to be part of this agenda, to say we're not too small, we can influence it. It doesn't matter how poor you are, we're in the same boat, because 10 years from now it's going to be too late for everybody to talk about this. And as I've heard before, now we're investing also heavily in education of younger generations, because we feel that our generation might have lost the battle, but we have not lost the war. And our challenge now is to teach the younger generations how to win that war, so that these topics do not get less and less important in the future.
Let's turn to Miami-Dade, which is a much larger region and has actually been at the forefront of this challenge for many years. They've had a task force in place since 2006. They have a regional compact, not only a regional task force in place, but also a regional compact. I want you to talk a little bit about that Southeast Regional Compact, how important it's been in sort of breaking down barriers. I heard you give an interview saying how big the barrier was between, in different counties there, and forging this alliance on climate change. How did that get done, and how important it's been?
That was a very, very important thing, because there's only two man-made things you could see from outer space: the Great Wall of China and the Miami-Dade County Broward line. Okay, that's those are two, really, really big obstacles. And so for us,
I didn't want to steal that line.
Yeah, right. Okay, and so for us, it was very important for us not only to break the barrier with Broward County, which is our county to the north. There's about 8 million people in this region, and so we have about 2.7. Broward County has well over 1 million people. Palm Beach north has has a sizable population, over 1 million people, and then we have Monroe, which is the Keys. For the 4 counties to get together and actually sign a compact of the things that we're going to do together, because we're, excuse the pun, we're in the same boat, okay, because of sea level rise, that we have to take action as regionally and do it in a coordinated way. We don't have the problem of fireplaces in Miami-Dade. We don't have too many of those. I don't think I've ever seen one. And we also don't have the problem in Miami-Dade and Broward and Palm Beach of the power generation generating much in the way of greenhouse gases. Most of our power generation comes from nuclear or gas. We don't have any coal. So we have a very clean environment. We've made commitments to reduce our greenhouse gases by 50% by the year 2050. We've also made commitments that we're going to work together to combat and adapt to sea level rise because the seas are rising. And we are ground zero for sea level rise in the world. A lot of it has to do with the fact, we're right next to the coast and right next to the Atlantic Ocean, but also our geology is such that it's limestone, which is very porous. And so we've spent millions of dollars, especially on our barrier islands, the most famous of which is Miami Beach, to combat sea level rise. They're really on the forefront. And so we're going to work and get partnerships with our educational institutions to see how we can mitigate the effects of sea level rise in Miami and Miami-Dade County, because we're not moving. And so for me, it's about my children and more so my grandchildren. I'm a grandfather. And for me, my duty as mayor is not about my next election, like the gentleman was saying before in the previous panel. It's really looking out for my children and, more importantly, my grandchildren. It's our duty, it's every generation's duty to leave a better place. It's also our duty, and this generation's duty, to not put on them what we should be doing. And so we are on the forefront of that. We're making the necessary investments. We are now embarking on the largest public works project in Miami-Dade County history, something about $10 to $15 billion to redo the entire water and sewer infrastructure with an eye towards resiliency. And resiliency and making sure that anything that we spend today, our children and our grandchildren won't have to redo in their lifetime. And so we were the first county in the United States to actually have a chief resiliency officer that takes a look at how Miami-Dade County will be resilient not only in climate change, sea level rise, but also in the economy, how we will react to any threats from a pandemic episode, storm surges. All those things are in the forefront of Miami-Dade County in our planning, and we have been doing that for quite some time with the help of the commission that is also very forward-looking and wants to make sure that we're always ahead of the game and not lagging behind.
We've talked a lot just in those answers there about the power of mayors and the power of cities, and I know my boss, Michael Bloomberg, will be talking about the power of mayors later today. But Mayor Ahmedi, you've talked about, I've seen interviews you've given where you say that national governments are moving too slowly, that there's more they could do. What more can they do? What would you like to see immediately happen? Why do you think this is still that we can't get this level of coordination, and why cities are proving to be some of the most effective leaders and hubs for reducing emissions?
Sometimes I think national governments cannot do more. I think that us mayors can do more, but that's subjective because we're mayors and we always think that we could do more. But Mayor Coder comes from a central government before he was a member of parliament, before he became mayor. I used to work in central government before I became mayor. And to tell you the truth, sometimes in national governments, for example, poverty is a statistic. When you become mayor, you see the face of poverty because you deal every day with meetings. So also climate change becomes more of you understand because you get the health costs for respiratory diseases during the winter because of using too much coal for heating during the winter. And these are things that we need to do more as mayors to put pressure on our national governments. And sometimes I think we as mayors could do more in pressuring national governments because we talk, we get together, we sign these agreements as we did with the Compact of Mayors, which is very good. But also I think we could put pressure on national governments to do more. The second thing that I think we could do, I heard the president of the World Bank speak today, used to work for the World Bank, and I think that the World Bank, especially in countries like ours where we are in IMF programs, where we get debt, where we get loans, and IMF puts macroeconomic programs, limits, how much we can borrow, we don't have enough conditions for central governments in order to give more to local governments. And here I'm talking about autonomy, I'm talking about financing, I'm talking about things that make an impact. For example, if we want to spend money on buying buses, which are, for example, in Pristina, Euro 6 standard, less emissions, by which we would reach the Compact of Mayors commitment that we've done, we need financing. And central government, when they discuss with the World Bank and the IMF, they put their priorities, and our priorities are last. When there is a limit by the IMF on these loans, we get cut off. And I think that international financial institutions could do more by putting conditions on central governments to give more autonomy, more projects to local governments, because we can deal better with the climate problems that we deal with. I had the experience with the buses. We're having now experience with the district heating. These are all very important projects for climate change, very important for the country, but when it comes to the central government, they put their own priorities first.
Mayor Coder, could you be doing more to put pressure? Should mayors be doing more to put pressure on governments?
Well, there's two things in life. Or you look at the parade or you're leading it. And we can't, no, but I mean, cities are supposed to be, or a metropolis is supposed to be that locomotive. So we have to assume ourselves. Central government can, of course, lead the way, can propose things. But, look at the facts. In the next 20 years, we will get at least 66% of the overall population within cities. 70% of all the energy issues for gas emission and all that are in cities. problems and the solution are in cities. And we are the level of government of proximity. We are the closest. So, of course, you always had some of the ego trips and some of the silos that exist, but we have to stop that. I think that we have to realize that, as I said this morning, get used to it, you're stuck with us. One. Secondly, this is not a conflict. We don't want to confront them. We're all part of the solution. So we have to realize that since Paris, when you have 1,000 mayors who sat together and spoke as one voice, it means that we are that counterbalance for the people, by the people, to provide those answers. So it's easy to fight because it's certain agenda, it's divided to conquer. But if you want to be really efficient, like we spoke a lot about resilience, which is, as Carlos said, which is great. We're part now of the 100 Resilient Cities, one of the first one in Canada. We believe that we need to connect the dots and all work together. And frankly, we all have a role to play. There's enough in 24 hours for everybody to do their part of the job. And we lived the last provincial election, the last federal election. All the mayors spoke as one voice, but instead of having a big grocery list, we decided to focus. So from public transit, environment, infrastructure, social housing. Because what we need to realize too is that we cannot just talk about economics, we just cannot talk about sustainability, we just cannot talk about social. They're all related anyway. So if we put the right person at the right place and make sure that we're all connecting the dots, as I said, it's going to work. And I had the privilege and the honor to be a member of cabinet in central government in Canada. So after 9/11, I was appointed as the Minister of Immigration and Citizenship. The issue of the movement of people is important because now you will witness not only there is some war refugees, but there will be some climate refugees. And all those social costs will come to the cities because they're receiving them. So we can have those emergency plans as a start, but afterwards, from the housing, from the jobs, make sure that the kids go to school, make sure that we feed everybody, make sure that we provide dignity. So we all have to work together. And the fact that I was from a central government as a start and now provide me also a perspective, but they were asking me what's the difference by being a minister and a mayor. I said I got promoted because I'm related to people now, but that proximity depends on the individual, not necessarily depends on what kind of constitution you apply or the level of government you're from.
I want to ask you the same question. You have a slightly different challenge here in the U.S. in terms of political will and getting national governments to act in terms of galvanizing. And you're in a unique challenge, given your party affiliation, et cetera. How much does Miami-Dade stand separately in terms of I'm going to push forward my agenda and I'm going to be a national leader, and I recognize the challenges facing building that political will?
The way that I like to work is I like to work cooperatively, but I'm going to do what we have to do. All right, and so I think we would have such a much better central government if everybody in central government were required to be a mayor first. Okay. Because then they would understand that, look, the local government, we affect you every single day. We pick up your garbage. We answer your call for help. We're the ones that clean the streets. We're the ones that probably are running the traffic lights. We're the ones that are running the public transportation system. So there's nothing that you can't go a day in life without the local government somehow, affecting your life. That's not the same thing that happens at the federal government. And so while I want to cooperate with them as much as possible, I ask their help as much as possible. But those processes take so long. Because of the bureaucracy, that sometimes you just have to move, and your people are, they're not going to accept the excuse of, well, I'm waiting for the federal government to do that. No, they want it done now, and you're right there, and so we will do it now. And so when the federal government is slow to react, we will take the forefront. We will actually push the envelope. We will push the agenda, and then if the state and the federal government wants to come along, help us, great. If not, we have to get it done. And so being a mayor is people say, hey, maybe you run for Congress. Never in my wildest dreams will I run for Congress or be a senator, because I've been part of a body like that, and you can't. It's just it's so much more gratifying being able to get things done and doing them in a timely fashion than it is to try to go through a bureaucracy. And so, I think what you're seeing now is the rise of the city-state. We all have the same problems, and he's from Kosovo, Canada, United States, and I've known that when I speak to mayors from around the world, it's exactly the same issue. That they know that they have to get things done, and they're the ones that are at the forefront. They know their local issues. They know what's important to their citizens, and they're going to get it done. And they all have the same, complaints about the central government. It's necessary. It's absolutely necessary, but it's gotten to the point where we know that we're going to have to take our steps, independent steps, in order to help our citizens in our communities.
Mayor Coderre, do you want to pick up on that?
I may just add, kudos to our governments right now in Canada. We have Premier Couillard from Quebec and Prime Minister Trudeau, where we're all working together. Okay, it's not just like we're complaining or we're fighting all the time. There is some good news, and right now we're negotiating because we have. We have a big budget. It's in a big city. We have already some powers to work with, but we're negotiating right now a new legislation between Quebec, the government of Quebec, and Montreal, so we'll have a new status of metropolis. And inside of that, getting rid of all the red tapes, all those issues about environment, decontamination, stuff like that, instead of just being in the waiting room so we can get an answer somehow, to provide the tools economically, socially, and at the sustainable level so we can focus on. And we have a prime minister now, thank God, in Canada who understands what climate change means and focus on the inclusiveness. And all the cities, we have an urban agenda, and we're all focusing at the same level. Of course, we can agree to disagree at a certain level, but there is not only just negotiation or pat on the shoulder. We are truly putting, the effort to have the powers and the tools to work with, so we can be, as Carlos said, efficient on the field too.
Well, for anyone who got to catch Trudeau's visit to here, I don't think there's a bigger rock star in
Organize a selfie if you want, no problem.
Right. Exactly. Please. I can't believe it, but that's all we have time for today in this short conversation. I could sit here and talk about this all day with the three. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
And let's get up there.